to introduce Lee Shainis from Intercambio. It was my pleasure to use the Immigrant Guide, one of the materials that he authored for several years when I was a program director. It was a really practical, culturally relevant pamphlet, basically, with lots of information for English language learners. And that's how I got to know him and his expertise. But we are fortunate to have him here today. You can ask questions, just add them to the chat, and then he'll answer those a little bit later in the presentation. So, without further ado, Lee, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Special thanks to Lisa, Nancy, and Lily for supporting me and inviting me. And very excited to do this. There is many hours of training, different trainings that are kind of condensed into this 1 hour, and don't expect you to retain everything, but really hope you walk away with, one or two things that you want to try. It's a combination of big mindset shifts around culture and privilege and power. And it's also a lot of very concrete tools that you can use in classes tomorrow, if you have class on Sunday. First, I'm going to be sharing a little contact form in the chat if you want a copy of the slides, so you don't have to take notes and write down things in the slides. I'll go ahead and just do that right now, and then I'll share it at the end as well. It's just your name and email and org. And I'm going to be breaking you up into a couple of small breakout rooms. I saw in the chat that one of your goals for a lot of you is to meet new people, and you can do that in breakout rooms. And also a great facilitator once told me that all meetings, classes, workshops should have a chance for everyone's voice to be heard. And that voice doesn't need to be heard by everyone, but it needs to be heard by someone. And in a large group like this, rather than having everyone introduce themselves to everyone, I'm going to put you into groups of 3 or 4 so your voice can be heard and you can meet some people and process some of these questions. So I'll be doing 2 brief breakout rooms. Also, if you want to have a journal, you want to write down some thoughts, you can do that too. I'm going to be offering a lot of reflection type questions throughout the training. And I'm going to start with just another really smart friend of mine. When we started doing everything on Zoom, I asked her, like, what's something you've learned about making Zoom meetings good? And she said, just have people do a brief physical movement before they start. It kind of creates this, just a little shift. So if you are able, just want you to stand up and do a stretch, or you can do a stretch just sitting down in your chair, reach up to the sky, you can stand, you can do a little dance. Someone mentioned it's World Laughter Day today. Awesome. I never knew that was a day. And then come back and just take a deep breath in and out. Okay. So if that made some kind of shift for you, great. If not, it was only 15 seconds. You got nothing to lose. So let's get into it. I'm going to share my screen and we'll be doing a breakout room in a few minutes here. All right. So this is the slightly longer title for the workshop, or the plenary, or whatever you call this. It's about fostering brave spaces for more speaking and mutual learning. And we do lots of different types of trainings, but I realize that they all play a role in this one. So that's why we kind of integrate a lot of the mini trainings into this one larger training. Before I begin, actually, I want to begin with this poem called Invitation to Brave Space. I'm going to read it quickly because it's on your screen. Together we will create brave space because there's no such thing as safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. The space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. There's a lot of cool stuff in that quote. Think about what in there resonates with you. And sometimes we start different meetings with that quote just to kind of set the environment. All right, the agenda for the next hour is, one, we're going to start with exploring the complexities and opportunities in our work. I'm going to talk about cultural humility versus cultural competence. Cultural humility is something we do a 6 to 8 hour training on. I'm just going to give you a few minutes on it today. We'll talk about this idea of multi-directional learning or mutual learning, where we get students talking about their knowledge, experience, and perspectives. So I'll talk about specific things we can do to create brave and welcoming environments in our classrooms, at staff meetings, anywhere. And we'll wrap up with a small breakout room to discuss something you want to try or something that's emerging or resonating for you from the many things that I'm going to be quickly throwing at you during this. But first, who am I and what am I doing here? So my name is Lee. I'm the co-founder of Intercambio. These are my two boys. This is Valentino and Matteo. This is the guy that I co-founded Intercambio with 22 years ago when we were 6 years old. I'm just kidding. We were a little older. And we had no idea what we were doing. Sean, the other co-founder, started meeting people in our community who wanted to take English classes. And I said, hey, that sounds cool. That sounds like a neat way to meet people and connect with people I wouldn't normally connect with. And I went to a family's house and taught them English, and it just completely changed my life. And we said, hey, we got to offer this to more people on both sides, because people like me want to connect and learn, and a lot of people want to learn English and feel like they're more part of our community. And so we gave it a shot. And since then, in Boulder County, where I live in Colorado, we've had 10,000 adult English learners and 5,000 volunteer teachers that have been a part of this program. Tons of amazing connections and friendships and lots of learning from both sides. It's been this beautiful thing. We do one-on-one classes and group classes. And we also have a national program where we partner with hundreds of organizations around the country. I think some of you are our partners and use some of our materials that we've created. We've created a full English curriculum that I'll allude to a little bit in this training, because it was really built to foster these types of conversations and create brave spaces. And also, Nancy mentioned the immigrant guide, which we're launching in Dari and Pashto in a couple of weeks for Afghan refugees. And then I also love teaching pronunciation. So I wrote this book called Pronunciation Fun with Pictures, which is part of the raffle. It's just a fun way to teach different sounds. And so those are some of the tools that we create. And then also, as part of our national network, we engage in lots of mutual sharing ideas amongst the organizations, challenges, successes, specific tools, and concepts and resources that people are using. So it's a really cool way to learn from each other. The Intercambio way is about creating access. It's about learning together, growing together, and creating a new future together. So we provide the curriculum and training that is really built on like proven methodologies, but also building in this concept of cultural humility and mutual learning into it, where we're all teachers and we're all students. And we talk a lot about skills and confidence, not just for our English learners, but also for our teachers, because one of our big dreams is that English teachers gain cultural skills and confidence to connect with people who are different outside of their class as well. And so that's part of the creating a new future together, just a new level of human interaction. We kind of need that in our country and in the world. So I'm going to start, I'm going to put you into small breakout rooms for about 4 or 5 minutes with 3 or 4 people. If you can turn on your camera, it's better if you can see people, but if you can't, you can't. And your quick discussion questions here are just introduce yourself. Why did you join this session? And where are you on this journey of brave spaces and mutual learning? So for some of you, you've been thinking about this and integrating this, these topics into your classes for years. For some of you, it might be new. That's okay. Wherever you are on this journey is fine. But I just want you to reflect and share about kind of where you are, and if there are specific things you've done to create brave spaces or mutual learning in your classes. Wonderful. If you haven't done anything, that's fine. Whatever you want to share about yourself is great. And I think people already shared their goals. So more focus on 1 and 3. Introduce yourself. Where are you on this journey? Okay, so I'm going to put you into some random breakout rooms here. We'll do groups of 3 or 4. You have about 4 or 5 minutes. So each person talks for a minute or so. Everyone ready? Thumbs up. Okay, cool. I'll see you back here in a few minutes. If you didn't get to talk about number 3, where you are on this journey, no problem. If you just got to introduce yourself, that's fine. But I would like you to just reflect on that, at least kind of where are you on this journey, and wherever you are is great. And the fact that you are here and interested in this topic is a big factor in learning more. And I loved one of the things in the chat. Somebody said, I want to hear about what I don't know that I don't know. And that's often a big thing about learning, and humility is just, being open and admitting that I don't know everything. So, all right, well, welcome back. We're going to keep going with the presentation here. So first on the agenda is complexities and opportunities. So really our programs are amazing and challenging, because we have people from vastly different backgrounds participating. Whether you're working with youth or adults, you probably have people of different nationalities, socioeconomic statuses, academic backgrounds, ages, genders, religions, all these differences, which makes our work incredibly amazing. And one of the few places where we see people from all these different backgrounds together every week or every day or twice a week. It also creates some challenges as well. So we talk about challenges like, childcare and transportation and time and money. We don't talk enough or think of enough about the other challenges like confidence and self-esteem. A lot of our students don't come in like, hey, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to learn English and it's going to be great and I'm going to do it. It's quite the opposite. They come in with a fear of failure, or they don't enter our programs because of a fear of failure. The number one reason why English learners don't join classes or why they drop out is not time, childcare, transportation. It's fear of failure, fear of making mistakes. So that's really important for us to know if we want to create this brave, welcoming, safer space in our classes. Cultural differences are beautiful, and it's amazing talking about them, and we'll focus a lot on that. It can also be scary for people to talk about cultural differences if we don't do it well. People will feel judged, they'll feel stupid if they're the only one who has a certain cultural perspective, if they feel like the teacher is judging them or peers are judging them. They're not going to feel that sense of belonging, and they're going to be out of there, and they're going to call you or not call you and say, hey, teacher, I changed my work schedule, all right? But it might be some of these other reasons that they just don't want to share. In general, we avoid talking about race and culture. Why? We're afraid to say the wrong thing. So our classrooms can be these brave environments where we can talk about different topics. We can ask questions. I'm going to give a few examples of specific words I hear that lead to conversations or a little bit more understanding. So some words I hear frequently that I'll start a conversation or kind of what I call gently offer an alternative on is the word illegal. People will say, oh, Lee, does Intercambio work with illegal immigrants? And instead of yelling at them or not addressing it at all, say, actually, the term that we prefer to use is undocumented, because we don't believe that anyone is illegal. And everyone that I talk to and gently correct says, oh, thank you, I forgot, I just forgot, or I didn't know that, thanks for offering that. American is one I hear a lot. And I will kind of gently correct people. It's actually the term we use is US American, because my wife is from South America. I've got thousands of friends from Central America, and those words also have the word American in it. So just to specify, and it's kind of this sense of like dominance, like the US owns America, but really Central and South America are also part of America. So it's another one. And then finally, this one I hear a lot, assimilation. So, oh, is Intercambio's teaching immigrants to assimilate into US culture? And I'll say, no, actually assimilation has a lot of racist history. And, this is a quote from Ibram X. Kendi, who wrote How to Be an Anti-Racist, that anytime we say that a racial group should change to be more like our racial group or to be more American is code for white American, we're articulating an assimilationist idea. This idea of assimilation also, connects to the boarding schools for Native Americans or the residential schools for First Nations in Canada, and just a really ugly part of our history. So I say, we're not teaching people to assimilate. We're about learning together. We're about people participating. We're about building skills and confidence for everyone. So lots of alternatives to that word assimilation. But the words are important. I used to say, I don't worry about semantics, but these are important words. And our students also want to know, like, what are the words that people consider offensive in our society here in the US? Because if I literally translate something, it could be really offensive here, but not, where I grew up. So, all right, I'm going to do a little kind of reflection activity with you. I'm going to read, I think there's 9 statements here. And if you agree with the following statement, I want you to raise your hand. You can raise an actual hand or a virtual hand, whichever hand you want to raise. And I want you to answer quickly. I don't want you to think about it. I don't want you to be like, oh, it depends on the situation. Just a quick instinctual answer for each of these questions, okay? I'm going to do a practice one to make sure that you are actually raising your hand virtually or in person. The statement is, I am paying attention, Lee. Okay, all right, see lots of hands raised. Okay, very good, very good. Okay, that was the easy one. Now these get a little bit harder. Okay, the first one is, it's okay to ask people you meet, what do you do for work? Okay, raise your hand if you agree. Leave your hand down if you disagree. Okay. All meetings should start and end on time. Raise your hand if you agree. Leave your hand down if you disagree. Okay. All right, see some more hand going up. Number 3, it is rude to interrupt someone while they are talking. Okay, raise a hand if you agree. See lots of hands going up for that one. All right. One invitation is a real invitation. So for instance, if someone offers me ice cream and I want ice cream, will I accept their first offer or will I wait for a second or third offer? Okay, everyone's like, yeah, I'll take the ice cream. Okay, next one. It's polite to say thank you if someone opens a door for you or me. Still don't know how to word that correctly. So if someone opens a door for you, it's polite to say thank you. Okay, all right, almost everyone agreed with that one. Saying hi to strangers is important for the community. Walking down the street. Okay. What do you think? It's important for the community. Yes, no. Making direct eye contact shows that you are paying attention. Okay, see some hands going up for that. If I'm late for a class, I will enter the class quietly. All right, so this is an in-person class. See lots of hands shoot up for this one. Okay, great. And I think that's it. Yes. So in our cultural humility training, when we just focus on this, we kind of dissect each of these examples for a good chunk of time. But I just wanted to share these quickly with you. I'll talk about the last one real quick. Number 8, if I'm late for a class, I will enter the class quietly. So I've heard from a lot of teachers that say, oh, Lee, it's so frustrating when students come in late. And rather than just sitting down at their desk quietly, they greet each student individually, which is really frustrating and really disrespectful. And, they've already come in late and they're disrupting the class now. And it's like, oh, timeout. Okay, here's a cultural example. For you, you've been taught to believe that this is polite, right? If you're late, you go and sit down quietly. In their lens, they've been taught the opposite. It would be rude to ignore their fellow students. Right? So we're coming in with 2 very different lenses. Which one is right? Which one is wrong? Neither. Which one is good? Which one is bad? Neither. But we were, a lot of our history teaches us to kind of quickly think that something is good or bad. And this is something you could have a conversation about. This is something you can create expectations around in your class, and you can introduce it in a way that's not judgmental or right, wrong, good, bad, and so on. All of these, whatever your response was, there are millions or billions of people who had the opposite response, and they're not right. You're not right. You're not there. The one response is not better or worse. These are really deep-rooted cultural differences, and they create a lot of conflicts, and they create a lot of opportunities to have discussions about these types of things. So I don't have time to go into all these examples, but they are really, they can be really rich examples. I'll allude back to a few of them. So what is culture? We talk about culture like an iceberg because you only see a little bit above the surface. You see the music and the food and the dance and stuff like that, but you don't see behaviors. You don't see, how do people see friendship and favors and life and death and what's right or wrong or good and bad or polite or rude? How do you greet visitors? All these things, there's like millions of things. That's why I like this quote. There are millions of little things to learn about cultural differences. And we all have our own individual culture. A lot of times we want to put people just into one group, like you're this nationality or you're this gender, you're this race, but we all belong to lots of different cultural groups. So I want you to just reflect real quick on which of these cultural groups are represented in your classes. Do you have people of different races, ages, genders, religions, political affiliations? Geographic location is a big one that we don't talk about. So did you grow up in a big city or a small town? That might impact how you see saying hi to strangers. Your family status. Did you grow up with 12 siblings or 0 siblings? That might impact how you see, interruptions. Do you hate being interrupted, or is it just something that's natural for you? It doesn't bother you. You do it. People do it to you because you had 12 siblings growing up. So a lot of these things impact our responses to these questions. So I want you to think about that. Income is obviously a huge one here. It's a big segregating factor in society. If you think about which of these you belong to, chances are you spend a lot of time with people who share a lot of these things in common with you. But in your English classes, chances are you've got a lot of diversity here. Another thing I want you to reflect on is just which of these would you consider privileges for you? So I look at this and say, look, my race is a privilege in our society. My gender is a privilege in our society. My educational background is generally a privilege in our society. So you can look at these and start to reflect on which of these are privileges and which are maybe not privileges for some of my students. And some of our students have privileges that we don't have. Another big privilege that we don't talk about a lot is being born into the language of dominance here, which is English, right? So that's a privilege that a lot of us have that many of our students do not have. So some thoughts around that. Another thing I'd like to throw out is I hear a lot of teachers say to students, what's this like in your culture? That's not a bad question, but it can be confusing, especially if we're looking at culture kind of holistically. I don't really know how to answer that. If someone's like, Lee, what's that like in your culture? I'm like, what are you talking about? Are you talking about my gender, my race, my profession, my religion, which of these things is my culture? So I just want you to think about, how does that feel when people ask you, what's that like in your culture? Or what does your culture mean to you? It's okay if you associate it with one thing, but what I recommend, other ways to ask that in your class is like, how is this cultural behavior similar or different where you grew up? So that way we're not saying that nationality equals culture. We're saying nationality equals nationality, or even within nationality, there's lots of differences because maybe you grew up, Mexico, for instance, is like lots of different countries, right? If you grew up in the North, very different than the South. If you grew up in a big city, very different than a small rural town. Or you can say, what is your experience at home with this example, with punctuality, with interruptions, with eye contact, fill in the blank, use one of those 9 examples or some of the other thousands of examples that exist with cultural differences. So cultural competence, what is that? That's kind of like what cultural training has been about for the last 50 years or so. And it's skills and values and tools that allow you to interact better with people from different cultural and ethnic groups. It's not a bad thing. However, in many frequently used competency measures, whiteness is understood and represented as the norm. So if we think about those initial questions where I had you raise your hands, some of those are like dominant behaviors, right? Like punctuality is something that's expected and it comes from, people in power. And the goal of cultural competency sounds ideal, but it may lead us to generalize rather than recognize uniqueness of everyone. Generalizing can be good and it can be bad. It's good when it can start a conversation. Like in general, people from this country see time differently than people from this country. That's okay. You're not saying everyone from this country is punctual all the time and everyone from this country is late all the time, but in general, there is a difference. right? When a generalization kind of turns into a stereotype or leads us to have biases, it becomes a bad thing. So if I see someone who, is from Latin America, I can't assume, oh, this person's going to see time differently, right? I know generally there is a difference, but I shouldn't use that to impact a bias or form a judgment or make an assumption about somebody. And like I said, there's millions of little things, so you can't expect to learn everything that's potentially offensive or polite for every cultural group, because it's not just nationality, that's a big one, but it's also race and gender and religion and sexual orientation and all those other things as well. So cultural humility is this term that I've grown to love because it's great. And it's hopefully, you learn a couple things about it if you haven't been introduced to it, or if you have, there's always more to learn. So the steps to model cultural humility are understanding what it is and what it isn't. Step 2 is reflecting on power dynamics and then also your own biases and judgments. So if you think about those examples again, you probably have biases and judgments. Like if you see time as this, you probably have judgments of people who see time differently. That's okay, that's our instinct, but we have to learn how to manage those. And again, all this relates to this overall topic of how do I create brave spaces in my class? And then finally, preparing and opening doors for the honest dialogues and modeling it. So again, English classes are these rare opportunities to have some really cool dialogues about cultural differences. If we just have role plays about returning stuff at a store, yeah, that's valuable, but it's not as enriching and leads to this mutual learning as much as having a conversation about eye contact or all those, real life cultural examples. And your students don't need to know what the term cultural humility means, but you can really model this as a teacher. So don't worry about teaching them the definition. There isn't really a good definition. It's more like bullet points, which I'll share right now. So first it's a mindset. It's not a goal. It's not like, okay, I'm now culturally humble. It's this ongoing mindset. It's continuously reflecting on your biases, how you treat and understand others. It's being aware of power imbalances. So being aware that, hey, as the teacher, I've got some power that my student doesn't have because they're learning English. And there's also a power imbalance between teacher and student. What can I do to maybe, shrink that a little bit? It's recognizing that no culture is superior or inferior. So it's not, going back to that example of entering a class quietly. It's not saying, hey, my way is the right way, your way is the wrong way. It's having the conversation about the difference and then agreeing, how are we going to handle this in our class? It's curiosity and ongoing learning. A lot of you are naturally curious because you're in this field. And if you're teaching in ESL, whether it's youth or adults, you're probably interested in culture. So that comes natural to most of us. And then it's being open about what we haven't learned yet. So I got this from a site called Psych Hub. It's got really good stuff on cultural humility. So if we have some cultural humility, we can start to take action and create what we call this multi-directional learning environment or mutual learning. So what happens when the helping and learning is multi-directional and not just coming down from the teacher? We increase belonging, confidence, engagement. We open doors for our students to share their experiences, to share their perspectives, to share their stories, to share their life, how they see the world. And when we do that, we become learners and they become teachers, which kind of shifts the power imbalance a little bit. And what we found is that the best teachers are the best learners. They're the ones who say, Lee, I feel like I'm learning more from my student than they're learning from me. And that's a beautiful thing. And I say, you know what? I know you're doing a great job. When I hear that, you are doing a great job. As opposed to teachers who come in like, I really want to help these poor immigrants. That kind of gets people in our doors as volunteers. But as soon as they come in, we say, okay, wipe that, mentality out and let's go to the learning together mentality, right? You are now a student. Your students have experiences and knowledge that they can share with you if you're open, if you create, opportunities for them to do that. A lot of times we don't create those opportunities. So we just perpetuate the power imbalance. And it's really good for language acquisition. How? Well, when we make topics interesting and relevant, students stretch to speak more. When you have a sample dialogue, the English that they're using is very limited. When you talk about something they're interested in, their first job, things they love, their dreams, their family, they stretch to use new words, and they ask questions. And that's really what kind of expands their ability to speak. And when they speak more, they acquire the language faster. That's one of the biggest barriers for our students, is giving them opportunities to use the English that they've learned in dialogue. So how do we spark these conversations about experiences and perspectives? Well, one is structure. If it's in a book, it feels safer. So whatever curriculum you're using or creating, it's a lot easier to have these interesting, relevant conversations if it's built into the curriculum. So in our books, in our Confidence and Connections books, every lesson has a culture tip and then a connect with conversation activity, which is meant to spark this mutual learning, where it asks the students, how is this different where you grew up? How is this different or similar in your home? What is your experience with this? What is your favorite blank and why? So questions that really are not yes or no answers, and where their language really can go in lots of different directions. And it's also important for them to ask you questions. Why? It humanizes you. It gives them practice asking questions, because learning a language is not just about answering questions, it's about asking questions if you want to get to know people. And you can model humility and the courage to respond. And sometimes by you, the teacher, starting the conversation, it opens doors for the students to share their experiences as well. So you can model this, non-judging mentality about differences. You can share mistakes that you've made and things like that. And oftentimes, just the English acquisition part, it's kind of, we have a whole workshop called Getting to the Conversation, but this is the one image of that, where it's the vocab and the grammar and the listening and the speaking and the pronunciation. And it's also this emotional environment that we create, where we're offering, corrections with encouragement. We're making it relevant and personal. We're doing things to create this positive learning space, which I'll talk about specific things you can do, and making it friendly and fun. And all those things can kind of build up into a solid conversation. The Immigrant Guide, which Nancy talked about, also is a great opportunity to bring up different topics that are very different for a lot of our students. So scams, laws, cultural norms, jobs, housing, finances, health, how the education system works, child discipline, extracurricular activities, all of these things, they can lead to good conversations where the student is not only learning about this important topic in the US, but you're also learning about how it's different in their native country or where they grew up. So how police works, it can be very different and fascinating to learn about, and really important for our students to know how it works in the US. Not saying this is the better way, but you need to know this if the police pull you over, and you need to know this about child discipline, and you need to know this about renting a home and your rights and scams and things like that. So what are some specific things we can do to create these judgment-free belonging zones in our classes? Because it can be scary for students to share about their lives and their cultural perspectives, because again, they might feel judged. So one is you can set expectations and create some kind of mantra. So I love when teachers have a little mantra that they start every class with. But first, here's some quick expectations and just clear policies, or whatever you call them, is you always want to give students the opportunity to opt out of a conversation. So if you're talking about family, for instance, most students want to talk about their family. Some come from traumatizing experiences where they don't want to talk about it. So you can always introduce the topic and say, if you don't want to share, no problem. Encourage risks, right? That's a big thing. Students who take risks learn more English. They succeed more in society. Speak without fear of making mistakes. So that goes back to the number one reason they don't join our programs, and the number one reason they drop out is fear of making mistakes, fear of failing. Being open and interested in cultural differences and experiences. So you can just say hey, in this class, we want to be open about differences and interested in differences and interested in people's experiences. And be clear about policies. So what do you do if a student enters a class late? Do you want them to greet each student individually, or do you not want to? How can you come to that agreement as a class? Because even if you are like, I'm okay if they come in and disrupt the class and greet each student individually, I've learned that it's a cultural difference. You might have students in your class who get frustrated by that. So if you don't have clear expectations around things that could create conflict amongst your students, it's better to be proactive and just address those things. If you need to, if you come in late, I understand that, some people like to greet everyone, but can we agree as a class that we're just going to go sit quietly? Is everyone cool with that? Okay, great. And do not judge. It's just important to say that. So yeah, I'd love for you to, if you do have a mantra that you use, you can include that in the chat now. It's cool to see different people's mantras. So here's some little some little ideas like take risks, make mistakes. I will practice, no judgment. I can do it. I recommend just picking 3 things to say at the beginning of every class, something that's authentic to you. So if it's something here, if it's something different, if it involves the word fun, if it involves the word, I don't know, whatever it is, but I encourage you to really have something that just you say at the beginning of every class that helps create that environment of courage and welcoming. So yeah, thanking them for patience, being grateful and appreciative that they're there is a great thing. So go ahead and share those, and you can see each other's if people are sharing their little mantras. And this is something from the book Culture Code about belonging that I like. It's quick. It's belonging cues that create safe connections in groups. So one is energy. Another word for this is preparation. Like when students see that you are prepared, they see that you're invested in this. Individualization, we know their lives. We know their kids' names. We know what they do. We know what they like. We know what drives them as individuals. This is a little easier to do when you have a smaller class, but even with a larger class over time, you can learn little things about their life. And when they come into class, just saying their name, having your name heard by people is also kind of a sense of belonging. Even on Zoom, and on Zoom, it can be even more important. If a student walks in late and you don't want to interrupt an activity, after that activity, just say, oh, welcome, Martha. I saw you came in. Thank you for being here, right? And future orientation, this is one that's not as instinctual. It's signaling that the relationship will continue. Like, hey, I'm here with you to the end of this term, right? I'm committed to this. I hope that we're all here at the last day of class, celebrating, giving them the visual of this future together, celebrating the success of sticking with it, not giving up, and that. Patience, 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 that's a huge one. So we want to keep expectations realistic. It doesn't, it's not a fast process for people to learn a language. So it's good to kind of ground people in like, hey, this is a long process, and it's going to take time, but if you stay with it, it's going to be great. Don't let frustration show, right? We sometimes get frustrated with slow progress, or a student didn't do the homework. Do not let frustration show even this much, because they will sense that and boom, they're out. When we do feedback for our classes, we always ask our students, how's your class? How's your teacher? The first thing they comment on is patience, right? My teacher is patient. Wait a few seconds before offering a correct answer. Even that is a big thing to the environment. So if you jump in too quickly with answers, they don't take time to process and they don't feel that sense of like safety, right? The teacher's just going to jump in. So just pausing, and that silence, which we consider awkward, is not always an awkward silence. It's a processing silence. And finally, one of our mottos is be strict but loving. So, our students often say like, oh, I love my teacher, they're really strict. I'm like, for a while, I was like, what? Like I was brought up like, oh, I hate this teacher. They're so strict, right? But our students kind of appreciate that structure. And when you're strict with love, it's great. We just added a teacher tip, little blog entry about how to handle student tardiness. That's on our resource hub. It's a really just good thing that I learned some different ideas of what teachers mentioned on how they handle student tardiness. So we put it into a blog, and you can check that out whenever you have a chance, but it's really good concrete tips on how to handle that. And another thing you want to do concrete is encourage. So saying great job is good, builds their confidence a little bit. Saying something specific like, wow, you can speak well in the past tense now is great, right? Anything you can give specific, concrete encouragement on. Wow, you can pronounce the V really well. You couldn't do that last month, right? Anything like that is really good encouragement, because a lot of times they don't see their own progress because it is slow and gradual. And then finally, this is something I'm dedicating my new life to, is helping people speak in a way that is better understood by people who are not 100% confident understanding English, right? I stepped aside as executive director of Intercambio a couple months ago. I am now officially a consultant. I am helping a lot with the national growth stuff, and I'm going to be doing, as a consultant, training focused on this, because I've seen that this is such a problem that is not addressed at all in English classes, in society. You know, teachers will say things in a way that students don't understand. And when they don't understand, their confidence goes down. When they understand, their confidence goes up. So you want to speak clearly, you know, not exaggeratingly or patronizingly clear, like, hello, how are you? You know, but speak a little bit clearer. You want to slow down a little bit and pause, right? I am not going to speak to an English class at the pace I'm speaking to you at, right? I'm going to think about the pace. I'm going to stop. I'm going to shorten my sentences. I'm going to use fewer words. I'm going to avoid metaphors and idioms. And the tricky one, I'm going to limit the use of tricky two-word phrasal verbs and words with multiple meanings. So this is stuff that we can really turn on awareness of quickly, but it takes a lot of practice and skill to get great at this. And, you know, I go in and I see teachers say, oh, you guys are killing it. I'm like, I don't think they know what killing it means. We just say these things naturally. Also, create the right space. I feel really strongly about creating environments where you can see people's faces. So if you're in a physical classroom, either a half circle or a circle, something where they're not looking at the backs of people's heads. And on Zoom, it's good to take a little bit of time to make sure that, you know, people's lighting is good, that they can see their face, that they're not like my aunt who, you know, is like this when we FaceTime with her. You know, just take a little bit of time to make sure people can see each other's faces if possible. And then finally, talking about race and equity in English language classes. This is something we are kind of working on a curriculum to do more, because we did a project last year where we had some like larger gatherings between English learners and community members to talk about race and equity, and we had some really awesome conversations. So why? There's a movement happening. We can be part of it. You know, our students are curious about this topic because they're seeing that it's in the news more. It's talked about at their work more. And a lot of them are like, I don't really understand this. This is so different where I came from. And our students can defend themselves better when they know more about history, when they know more about inequities and equities and their rights and things like that. And there's important language for them to learn as well around this topic. So a quick example is like, I've heard students say, blah, 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 colored people, right? Because like in Spanish, it's like gente de color, but colored people is very different than saying people of color, right? So it's something, you know, there's lots of examples of things like that that are really important, just subtle changes, but they could come off as offensive if they don't know this. So again, this is a brave space, a safer space to talk about language around equity and culture. And it just deepens our connection when we have these beautiful conversations. I presented a cultural example last week, a case study where I said, let's say a student comes up to you and says, teacher, I've noticed that African Americans in the US use bad grammar, right? As a teacher, you can be like, oh, you can't say that. But what this teacher did was she flipped it and turned it into conversations about civil rights and how there are different kinds of English spoken, and it's not better or worse, but that there's a lot of, you know, historical inequity around how we see language use and formal language use. And I was like, that's so cool, you know, instead of just being like, oh, no, you can't say that, right? So you can turn these things into conversations that build connection, build understanding, build learning. Some quick ways to lead those conversations and structure them about race and equity is start with some of the key vocabulary and pronunciation of, you know, a few key words. I like to present a short video. Like this is a video I've used. It's just from the Khan Academy. It's about Jim Crow segregation. It's like 5 or 6 minutes. They kind of write stuff slowly as they talk. It's a good pace, and that can introduce a topic or an article. You want to present facts, not personal opinions, as much as possible, and then give them opportunities to share personal experiences around this topic or questions they have. So just wanted to share that, because that is something that we want to see, again, happening more in English classes, because our students want to know more. We need to be having these conversations, and outside of English classes, a lot of people don't feel safe having these conversations. Okay, so I just went through a lot of different stuff with you, and I'm going to put you back into breakout rooms in a different group, so you get to meet about 3 new people. And I want you to just talk about kind of what's resonating for you. What's one thing that you want to try from this workshop? If there's something you need to make it happen, what is that? So you can think about it for a moment. What's something you're taking away from this workshop? All right, welcome back, welcome back. Is that too much time? Not enough time? Just right?
Not enough.
Not enough. It's never enough.
Not enough.
Not enough.
You know, it's better to have not enough than too much. Cool. Before I forget, I'm putting the contact form in the chat again. So if you want a copy of the slides, you can just quickly enter your name and email and org. And I want to wrap up with, if everyone can write in the chat something that you'd like to take away, so that everyone can see kind of what's top of mind for people, what you want to try, or it could be something you heard in your group. Well, I ask you to do that. I love one of these mantras that I saw: be kind, try your best, and have fun. Nice one. I like that. I like the kind. Just try it. It's all about trying our best. So someone said, love the part about everyone has their own personal culture. The Brave Spaces poem. Yeah, you can use that. Thinking about ways to have conversations about cultural difference in a level 1 class. Yeah, it's a little more challenging, but it is possible. It really requires some of those simplifying language skills, especially in level 1. So you do have to maybe think about, how do I present this, in a way that level 1 students will understand. Good. Someone's interested in looking at the Khan Academy videos. Yeah, rethinking how interrupting is disrespectful. Yeah, we had a really interesting conversation with our staff about interruptions, because some people are like, they're fine, and other people are like, I can't stand them. Doing a little movement before class, making sure we can all see each other. Wow, you guys are covering like each one of the slides here. Let's see what else. Structuring encouragement to specific skills. Yes, that's a good one. Yeah, involving students in the class policies. That is interesting. Give it a try, see what happens. A lot of our work is just like trying different things, throwing things at a wall, seeing what sticks. If you're teaching pronunciation, it's like, try this. That doesn't work. Try this. That doesn't work. Try this. Let's see what else. This is great. Yeah, copy slides. Got it. Yeah. So yeah, introducing the cultural iceberg with students also. That's a great idea. Talking about what culture is with beginning learners. Having students create norms that are built together so we can bring in different perspectives and experiences. Awesome. I love it. Thank you all for joining and being open and walking away with something you want to try. You might look at the slides and think of other things that you want to try in your classes as well, or just those mindset shifts. So whatever you got out of this, as long as it's one thing, thank you. And then thought-provoking, what's that like in your culture versus what's this like where you grew up, or how is this different where you grew up? Great, laughing and singing. Thank you, everybody. If there's we got 1 minute for questions. Any burning questions or anyone? Yeah, and if you're like, oh man, I'm totally guilty of doing this, don't worry about it. We all make mistakes. That thing about making mistakes applies to us as well. I made a mistake in a training this week. I got called out for it. I learned and I move on. So that's sometimes how we learn the most. So yeah, so thank you everyone. Thank you for doing this work, for being here. Again, thank you to ORTESOL for inviting me and for coordinating this. Y'all doing a great job. I love the energy and just you all, I think, model this sense of encouragement. So I really appreciate you all. And I can't believe we're ending on time. I jammed a lot into that, and I'm sorry if I spoke too fast. That's one of my things, but hopefully you got it, and the slides are there for you to look at.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you so much for your presentation. I loved it. I feel like there was something there for all of our members. We have a wide range of membership, from higher education to community education, and I felt like, I've been in the field for 20 plus years, and I just felt like there was a lot of nuggets there that many of us can use. So thank you so much.